favorite Amazon procurement nerds are back. And today we are going to be talking about something that I'm really passionate about, which is public speaking. I think when you're in marketing and really no matter what you do in your career, I think it's something that's so important to learn how to do. Does not mean that we're all going to be expert public speakers and make money at it and do it for a living. But I think it's a really important skill to have, just again, no matter what you decide to do with your career. I still remember we were both at the Spark conference 2 days or so before the world shut down,
Yep.
and you did, I think it was a keynote at the
hmm
Ferry Building, and I remember you talking about SAP and Ariba, and I just absolutely loved it because it was very non-conventional and very real and no fluff. And I remember coming up to you after your presentation, and I met your speaking coach
Yes.
who actually came, and I thought, "That is so interesting to me." The Dr. Eloise actually has a speaking coach, and she came to see you speak, so I got to spend a little bit of time with her. So, I thought it might be fun or interesting for our audience today if maybe we both kind of talk through our personal journeys of public speaking. You do it a lot more than I do. It's something that you're paid and you travel all over the world. I do it in a little different capacity since I'm in marketing. So maybe let's start with your journey. I'll talk through mine, and then I want to make sure we share some of our tips because I have some weird quirks that I kind of worked through, and I think they might be useful to other people.
Awesome. Well, let's jump into it. So, I think it's worth noting public speaking is one of the true joys in my life. I love it. When I have fantasies, I fantasize about getting up in front of a crowd of 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 people. So
Now
that's my
I have to ask, was this always the case when you were younger? Because that's very
no.
not normal.
No, it's when I started to do it a couple times and then I started working with the coach and getting better, then it became addictive.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say I'm addicted to it, but I love it. And I hope my next career, like as whatever point I move on from consulting, I will do public speaking as at least a part of my sort of daily or sort of annual work. Because right now I do anywhere from 20 to 30 public speaking events a year. And I throttle, that's throttled. I get asked to do a whole bunch more.
Now, when you say public speaking, I want to clarify, are you talking about in person or virtual or both? Because they're very different.
Both. Yeah, both. However, uh, I I include both when I say that because I actually do prepare quite a bit for virtual public speaking events because oftentimes we just they're slapdash and you can tell as an audience member when they are not well thought out. Now I tend not to do panels unless it's I do it as a favor or somebody it's something really important. So I talk about when I talk about that doing something virtual, it's like a webinar or a fireside chat where there's prep and I have a clear idea of where I'm going.
Mhm. So maybe I'd love to hear because I don't think you've actually even ever told me how you became to how you came to like public speaking and actually do it because it's actually hard to get asked to speak in the beginning when you're kind of a no name and nobody's ever seen you speak before.
I was asked at the last minute to fill in their ISM used to have an ISM diversity conference, and that was pre-transition. So I didn't fit the criteria, but they had somebody back out last minute, and Carney was involved as a sponsor, and so, or maybe not even a sponsor, but anyway, somehow I don't know what the relationship was, but I got asked to do it last minute. I only had like 4 days to prepare, And I remember writing out all my notes, working with Sarah on them, trying to put my slides together. And I got up there and it went well. But it was kind of, again, it was slapdash. And I,
You
after that,
remember
I
what
just,
the topic was of your very first?
oh yeah, no, I know you, and I go back to this because I still use some of the content. It was AI in business, and that was in 2017. If you're keeping score, so I have been talking about AI in business for well more than 7 years. So this whole craze right now, like I'm a little over it, even though I actually do appreciate what's going on.
So you were speaking about AI before AI was really a thing.
Yeah, and like one of the and I used a couple of great examples. At the time, Microsoft had like a few months earlier had a complete disaster with a chat bot that they had released in China. It's called Tay. And when they released it here and they encouraged everybody to train it, of course the trolls, this was in 2017. So that was when a certain president had just come into office. So there was a big push around that. And so the chatbot became very homophobic, xenophobic very quickly, and Microsoft had to take it offline. So I talked about that, and there's a couple of AI military examples that I used, and so it was actually very well received, and the content still holds up today, which is interesting.
I almost feel like you should do a compare and contrast of the 2017 presentation versus your 2024 AI presentation. And I wonder how much of it, it sounds like a lot of it is still relevant and is kind of coming full circle already.
Oh, totally. And I remember making fun of RPA, which I still do. And RPA was kind of a big hype thing at that time. And I was like, this is stupid. What are we talking about here? So,
So how many, so first, so this fell in your lap, you had just a couple days to prepare. How many people were in the session? I'm hoping that kind of stuck in your head as your very first speaking opportunity.
it was about, I'm going to guess about 50 people, maybe 75. Wasn't that big, but and it went fine. I had all my notes written. I had an outline, so and I kept referring back to the outline because I didn't have it memorized, which is not something I do anymore. I will not bring paper up on stage. So
So you, this speaking coach, Sarah, who was helping you with your, I guess it's kind of like improv, right? Where you write your own
yeah.
story and then you go on stage and tell it. So talk to me about, so you did this presentation, then what happened next? How did that morph into, wow, this is something I really like and I'm going to start doing a lot?
Well, again, it seems so coincidental because at the same time I met the fantastic Amanda Prochaska, who got me involved with ISM. And so my content was taking shape, my public speaking capabilities were taking shape. And then I applied to speak at ISM, and that just sort of that was it. Like I was hooked, and I was doing it, and then I was getting better at it. My content was resonating and it was interesting. And then I was off to the races. And once you get out there, so I know I haven't quite answered the question because it was a bit happenstance for me. But once you get out there and if you're compelling, other people will pick it up. And this gets back to what we've talked about before is having your social media profile. People will start to say, ah, that person's interesting. Let's invite them to be on a panel. Let's invite them to do these other events, and then you can be off and running.
So talk to me about how you prepared mentally and physically, because speaking is not easy, no matter if you love it and you walk into a room and there's faces and people that are actually looking at you and you're getting up on a stage. And I'm also curious about your strategy in regards to slides or a presentation. I have a very strong opinion about that, but I'm curious kind of how you crafted and created those.
Okay, so well, first off, how I prepared mentally, physically. My first time out, my first few times out I didn't, I actually did not, other than sort of working with Sarah. It was just all moving too fast, and it took time for me to develop those skills. And a lot of the work that Sarah and I did, it uh, was about how to slow it down and really be in the moment. For those of you that have seen the Netflix series Cheer, which is about the in the U.S. the cheerleading national championship competition, and one of the things that there's a team out of Texas that they spotlighted. It's great. I watched it during the lockdown, um, and and one of the things that they learned is that walking from the hotel to the stage where everybody performs was actually tiring the folks out, and they were having trouble sort of. Uh, I don't know what it was exactly, but essentially the next year they started practicing the walk to the stage before they even left for the competition. And so part of their prep was walking to the stage. And that's always stuck with me, because a lot of where I've run into problems over the years, and I still run into problems, are things that are totally unexpected. An issue with a shoe, getting lost, losing this, losing that. And so much of it, that's why the preparation and sort of preparation into the day of is so important.
So, if you're comfortable sharing, I'd like to know how you built up your brand and how you actually get speaking gigs and how you charge, because speaking is a lot of work. So it's one thing for those of you that are listening and are like, "Oh, I might be interested and you speak once in a while." It's a very different story if you're going to be really really focused on and targeting speaking as a revenue stream and being able to charge for it, because there's a lot of speakers out there and people are cheap and they don't want to pay.
Yeah, especially especially in the procurement realm. I think there's while there are a lot of speakers out there, there also are a lot of opportunities that are paid for good speakers. What because I look at and I watch other public speakers, and some of the ones that I've seen are pretty dreadful. And so they're commanding, a fair amount, a fair price. And so uh, even if what their content has nothing to do with the actual uh, uh, conference or event. So I forgot the question, but
Well, so I guess it's two-part. It's first of all, how do you get speaking gigs? So you're known, and I'm assuming most is coming inbound, but how did you start building that, like marketing yourself to be a speaker? And then how do you charge?
okay, yeah. So what I did is, as I applied to conferences like ISM, there was a couple others, and when my content started landing, then and was engaging, like you remember some of the content I presented, that was happening a lot. When you stand out, then other organizers will see that or hear about it, and they'll reach out, and that's pretty much that dynamic has continued. Now, how do I charge and how do I decide what to charge? It's important to note that, well, one of the reasons why I charge is because it's a lot of work to do a presentation. It's not like I'm taking the same thing I do on my day job and just getting up on stage and doing it. I work really hard to craft something that's, and when we talk about how I prep, I got more into this, but I really craft a very specific story or set of stories and storyline for the presentation. And I mean, I believe in paying people for their labor, and so of course we should charge, and and then the other piece is that I also use it as a way of throttling my commitments because I want people to invest in. If they want me to come, I want them to invest in making it successful versus uh, where it helps me to separate out who's not who's just taking advantage. And I would say just collectively to the procurement industry, I want to see more people charge because even if it's a nominal fee, because I will do nonprofit
And
things.
what's nominal? Like I have no idea what we're talking about. I mean, I've seen speakers charge $500. I've seen keynote speakers charge $50,000. So what are we talking about when you say nominal or kind of your standard fees?
So my standard fee for uh, US based traveling is between 5 and 10,000 per event. My international rate is between 10 and 15,000. Now I have to give a huge disclaimer that I don't see any of that money. If it's international, it goes to Carney as reimbursement for my travel. And if it's in domestically, and it's usually I align it with client meetings, and so then that money just gets donated. So I don't ever see any any of this money. It's important for me to note that. When I say nominal, though, there are a number of nonprofits that I have spoken at, and for them, I actually don't give them. I just say, please make a donation on my behalf. You choose the amount, because I've determined that it's important for me to support this nonprofit.
Mhm. And then what about so this is in person. What about digital? So doing webinars, LinkedIn Lives, which is very different prep, right? There's not travel involved, but there's still the content piece, there's still the mental piece. So how do you differentiate kind of your prep work and your process between the two?
Um, by the way, I will. It's a good prompt. I charge 2,500 for virtual events.
Okay.
So and the prep is largely the same. And the big thing is not having to travel because there's a huge amount of overhead just in terms of getting somewhere. And I've shared some videos on LinkedIn and my YouTube channel of my trip to Dubrovnik and how hard it is to get there, but how much fun it is when you get there. But I still craft that storyline. I prep my slides, and I really think about the audience and what I want them to get out of it. Oh, go ahead.
So yeah, so I was gonna say, so for virtual, so it's about half because which I've seen kind of that's kind of standard when the travel because you not only is it your time, but it's all the lost revenue from actually
Yeah.
doing consulting work. So I
Yes.
mean, totally justifiable. Most virtual events that I've participated in, speaker commitment is like 45 to 60 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's a much smaller window.
Um, I want to ask you about your experience though, because like I know how I do it, but I'm really curious if you could talk about your journey too.
Yeah, so I would say it's very different when you're on the sell side.
Yep.
Especially in procurement, most procurement conferences, whether it's in person or virtual, they want buy side speakers.
Yeah.
They don't want sell side speakers. So I would say it's much harder to pursue a career in public speaking if you're in the procurement space and if you're wanting to speak at procurement events or conferences. So I think that's an important caveat. Dr. Eloise, you're not buy side or sell side, really. I mean, you're kind of
Right. Yeah.
like a consultant, which is in a different category. And I feel like that's much more accepted as, quote, bringing in a consultant expert speaker versus somebody who is technically on the go to market or marketing or sales side.
Right.
So I would say my speaking is much more heavily geared towards digital. just because as a marketer, a lot of my strategy has been around launching digital events and digital programs, especially when COVID hit. There was a series of roadshow in-person events I was running and doing, and that all kind of got shut down. So I really had to say, how can I create unique, intimate experiences, but have it be done virtually? So when I talk, I just want to kind of make that call out that mine is much more on the virtual side versus the in-person side. And I would
Can I
say,
ask you a question?
yeah,
Can I interject a question? Oftentimes, if you're writing a big check to an event,
yeah.
you will get a paid slot or whatever. I don't know what the right term is. How do you approach that as a marketer? Because almost 99% of those sessions are dreadful. So how do
So,
you approach that?
so this is perfect timing, actually. I promised to the audience this wasn't queued up. We didn't speak about this ahead of time. So, yes, we're recording this session a week earlier. So, I just publicly announced yesterday my new role, hence, I'm wearing red today. I am running marketing for a company called Umnitsa, which is actually in the IT space. So, a little bit of a career pivot for me, moving from the procurement world, selling into the IT world. I'm working for Donna, who is kind of a product legend in procurement from Coupa. She joined Umnitsa a few weeks before I did. So with that, prior to me joining, we had a commitment for a trade show in October. Now, keep in mind, I am not a big fan of booth sponsorships. I think they're very, very expensive. And I think there's typically a lot better ways to generate an ROI. So I want to caveat that that was preset in motion before I joined. We have a 45-minute session as part of our sponsorship. I think it's so, so important to have a customer speak on your behalf. Do not have your sales team going in and doing a massive sales pitch about your company. And I've seen it so many times where this whoever is speaking is somehow on the go to market team. They're coached, they're guided, they get on stage, and oops, the content changes and there's a sales pitch coming out. So a great way to just handle that is have a customer present. They will tell the story, they will talk about their pain points, they talk about their journey. And what it does, it allows the audience to relate to somebody that's like them. I can
Yeah.
relate to a director, or I can relate to a CIO, or to that VP of sourcing or that VP of procurement. Now, I will say not all of our customers are great speakers and great
Right.
presenters. And it sometimes can be really challenging to get a customer to speak because of their company policies, and legal will come in and say, we don't want you speaking, or we don't want our name mentioned. So when you do get a customer that's able to speak, and you can't tell, or in your prep you maybe think they're not going to be super strong, I would recommend an interview style session like we have with our podcast, where you've got two chairs on stage and you are interviewing your customer. So you're still avoiding and eliminating that sales pitch. You're allowing that relatability, but you're helping the customer be a stronger presenter than them standing alone on stage.
I just have to give a personal experience. I did I'm not going to name names, but there was a keynote panel that I was on, and it was the moderator of the panel worked for the company. And just like you said, this guy couldn't help himself. He just went right into selling mode. Sell, 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 talk to client.
Mm.
Sell, 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 talk to me. Sell, 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 back to the client. It was, and of course, it, it not only is it bad in the moment, but it just leaves, like with the clients, it just leaves a bit, sort of a bitter taste.
I call that a cringe moment when you're stuck on stage with somebody
Oh,
selling and you can't be like, hey, stop doing that. We need to pivot our
Right.
content. Or when you're in the audience and you totally check out, then you're hopping on your computer or your cell phone and you're done. Like you've lost
Yeah.
the audience. And there may be other great speakers on the panel that are going to add valuable content, but it's that one person that potentially ruins it for all of the speakers.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'll add to that, to your question around if you are sponsoring out a speaking slot, is if you so I know panels can be really popular. I would say, so if your strategy, if you're not going to have a customer present solo or have you yourself be on stage interviewing a customer and you're going to go to the panel format, make sure you have a strong moderator. I was at an event earlier, was it this year? I think it was January or February, and there was a couple other local procurement folks that I brought, and a girlfriend of mine invited me, flew in from out of town. I coordinated a dinner after, so it was worth it. And showed up, and the moderator literally did not know how to lead a discussion. I wanted to go take the mic and run the panel for him. It is essential that you have a dynamic, interesting person that knows how to ask questions and keep the conversation, because your panel will die. No matter if you have strong panelists, you've got to have somebody who can keep the conversation on track and make sure there's key takeaways that the audience will be able to glean from the discussion.
Okay, so I got to interject here too, because this is a great conversation. So one of the things so been asked to host, and I actually don't mind hosting panels. Not my favorite thing to do, but one of the things I work with my coach Sarah is we practice what makes a good host, and we would we would practice that. And the mistake, if you take nothing else away, as a host, the mistake that just kills these things is there's three panelists and you're the host. And you say, how did you get how did you get what do you think of AI? And then that person answers, and that's fine. And then they go to the next person, what do you think of AI? So now the entire audience knows what's coming next. And it's just like, and then you just ask don't ask the same question to each panelist.
Well, and
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 I'll
then,
I'll I'll throw into that. So I also have that rule, always ask a different question each time. I also, when I'm prepping, will tell the panelists, do not say, I agree with what Sarah said, or I agree
yeah,
with what Jenny said, right?
yeah,
That's not adding any value. So you need to add your own unique perspective and not just mimic or repeat or piggyback off what someone else said.
yeah. And one thing is, if you do get into an exciting dialogue and it's going back and forth, one of the things as a host, I will do, instead of saying, what do you think about AI in business, Sarah? And then all of a sudden you're like, wait, what? What was the question? I wasn't listening. So what I'll do is, Sarah, I'm going to ask you the next question. What do you think? So all of a sudden now I've cued you that I'm going to ask this question to you. So, and that helps because they can start to form a more coherent answer.
And I will also say, it's important when you take audience questions. My preference is to do it throughout and not wait till the end, because often the questions are very relevant to something that's being said at that time. And if you hold till the end, it's kind of hard to go back. So I always like to say, we're going to take questions throughout. When questions come in, as the moderator, guide who the question is for. Pet peeve of mine is somebody raises their hand, asks a question, and then nobody on the panel says anything and it's dead silence, or everybody's speaking at once. So I'll
Yeah.
direct it and say, thank you for the question. Hey, Jenny, I'd like to have you take this one first.
Yeah. Um, and then if I could just give a PSA, a public service announcement, as a panelist, and I say this as an audience member, not so much a presenter, is no more than 2-minute responses. And one of the things that I worked with my coach on is getting mentally timing what 2 minutes is. Because if you go on beyond 2 minutes, everybody's tuned out. And so you want shorter, more precise answers. 2 minutes is plenty of time to elaborate. You time yourself talking for 2 minutes, you'll find it's a long time. So if you are going to do this and you're going to be on panels for a while, one of the first things you can do is be a really good panelist by having crisp, well thought out answers that don't go on. And it's better to give a 30-second answer than a 5-minute answer where, because then what you're doing is you're taking all the other time from the panelists.
I call it a ramble.
Oh,
It quickly becomes a ramble. So something else that I'll throw in around, again, since I do a lot of digital presentations, or this relates to really in person or panels as well. But when you are preparing a deck, my strategy is as few of words as possible.
yes,
So I
yes,
like
yes.
to, and I've mentioned this, I think, on another one of our episodes. I'll shout out again. So Gabe Perez, when he was at Coupa, he keynoted a SIG conference. And it was one of my favorite SIG presentations because he had no words on his slides. Every slide was an interesting graphic, and he used that graphic to guide the story that he was telling throughout his discussion. Now, is it realistic that every presentation you're going to get is going to have no words? No, but it's a frame of mind to be thinking about, how can I limit how much content I put on my slides? So when I'm preparing for something, I really think about a video or a graphic or an image that I think is going to be interesting, that I can speak to, versus having words that people have to struggle to read.
Yeah, because people can't read the stuff. Now you said something so I do not use videos. I used to use videos, but what I learned is that, or at least in my experience, is that it distracts from the story that I'm telling because we are so visually brought into an image will help you set the stage, but a video will take people away from your focusing on you to focus on the video. And so I used to do it a lot and I don't do it anymore.
So I was just at the High Explosive conference I mentioned on the last episode in Kansas City for a week. My boyfriend is a scientist and gave a couple presentations, and I went to the banquet. And the presenter, I think Dr. Eloise, I text you some of the slides during the presentation. One of them was a buzzword slide, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is so Dr. Eloise. But he incorporated video in a unique way, in that he had examples of AI with AI characters in really short, like 10-second clips. And I thought it worked really well. So he would have a really short thing to play that showed what he was talking about in relation to AI, and then would speak to it. So I have seen video done really well. That's just a top of mind example. But I do think you have to be careful that you're not playing something that's so long that you
Right.
lose people, or you have technical challenges. There's a lot
Yes.
of times where you're trying to play a video and then it doesn't work, and then everything gets derailed. So if you are going to do it, I just think be thoughtful and intentional about how you incorporate it.
Absolutely.
So let's I want to make sure we have time to share some of our tips. So
Yep.
things that
Let's
you
do
do
tips.
before, during, and after that you think have really helped you, that our listeners maybe can take some notes here.
All right, so I'm gonna give you mine, then I'll ask for
Okay.
prepping, and then I'll ask you for yours because I'm curious about yours as well. Okay, so and I'll give shorter answers, by the way. I'll stick to my 2 minute. Practice, practice, practice. That is 90% of public speaking is knowing what you're gonna say, having it on the tip of your tongue, and being able to get up there. I have three different full 1 hour presentations in my head that I can just get up on stage and do right now. I can mix and match them, and that I can do that because I know that content so well. So practice. And this is again 90% of what working with a coach is this practice. The first question that I always ask is what do I want the audience to take away, and what do I want them to feel? And being able to answer that, and along with answering the question, why am I doing this for me? And am I doing this to inflate my ego? Am I doing it to practice being a better public speaker? Or am I doing this because I've always dreamed of getting on stage and doing X? Um, you should be able to answer the question, why should somebody care about what you're saying? Because if you're just, this gets back to the selling, getting up there and selling, I don't care about what you're selling. So as an audience member, make it compelling for me. Um, and then in terms of just prepping, so the one is slides. Get them done a week in advance. I used to work up until the last minute in consulting. We will be in the client's building in the lobby, working on the final slides. As a public speaker, don't do that. There's nothing that you're going to put in your slides that is going to change, that should change anywhere near. So be early, send those off, and it helps the presenters to have all those decks early. And then obviously hiring a coach and the final prep thing is visualize the day. And I was just talking about that with that example from Cheer. Is I really figure out where the conference is, figure out where the stage is. If it's a big keynote that I'm doing, I will walk the stage the day before. I will stay till the end of the day on the day before so I can be on stage. I can feel the space. I know where I'm going. It's obviously helpful when you go repeat at a conference, but just know what it feels like to be in the space and how you're going to prepare everything from getting dressed. What are you going to wear? What are you going to eat? When are you going to eat? Et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of self-care elements of that, because you'd be surprised the darndest things can happen, whether it's a cab or trying to find a cab or an Uber or whatever, or like all that stuff needs to be worked out a week or two in advance, well in advance. So,
So my prep is going to be more geared towards digital versus in person. First is time yourself. So I run through
yes.
everything I'm going to say and I time each segment and I make sure that it's not too short or too long. Pick your outfit out ahead of time and make sure it's flattering on camera. Colors matter, shapes matter, jewelry matters. So I always make sure I have my outfit prepared and I've looked at what it looks like on camera, looked at it in a mirror.
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
Because really, a lot of we talk about the content. This is about respecting the audience, and how you dress also conveys how you do or don't respect the audience. And I don't care if it's formal or it's hoodies and sneakers or trainers. You can still dress nice and still be casual. And too often I see people half-ass their clothing choices. So it actually does matter, even if you're in hoodies, wear a nice hoodie or
Well,
wear a nicely
well, know your
branded.
audience. I think what you wear also depends on what you're talking about and who you're presenting to. If I'm
Yeah.
going to a rap concert, I'm not going to wear necessarily my Ted Baker dress and heels or my Marvelous Miss Maisel outfit. I may come in something a little more grubbish. So, but that's being smart enough to plan ahead and figure out what's going to resonate with the people that you're presenting to.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to just interject on that one.
If you are having speakers other than yourself, which in my experience, most digital speaking, you're going to have at least two people, do a prep call. I don't care if it's 10 minutes, if it's 15 minutes, get on a phone, walk through it, practice your technology, do it ahead of time. If you don't, you will regret it. Something is going to happen that you could have avoided at some point if you don't do a prep call. have people get on at least 5 minutes early before the call. So I'm very conscious. Now, I've also been on panels where they're like, "We're gonna join 20 minutes early." Well, that's not realistic. People are busy and have meetings back to back. So don't be crazy the other way. But I ask people to be on 5 minutes early because I wanna check their audio and visual. And it's really important. We use StreamYard to record our podcast, and not all people use StreamYard. And I've had where the first time people have come on a show, they have to configure some things, go into their settings. It's just stressful if you don't give yourself enough time to do that. And then my last one is I live in farm country in Danville. So we're kind of in the boondocks, and our internet is kind of crappy.
Yep.
Have two internet lines. So we have internet one, internet two. So if I'm on and the internet's crapping out or something's happening, I can easily pivot versus having something completely shut down, especially if I'm the one hosting the event. And if my internet down, the whole internet. So have a backup plan or think ahead about, okay, if we have an internet issue, what am I going to do?
And have a backup device, because I'll tell you, I was in Copenhagen doing a virtual event, and I I was in Copenhagen to do an in-person event, but I also, before that, the day before, was doing a virtual event. My computer would not work. The prep, of course, worked fine. Then the computer didn't work. So as I'm we're frantically rebooting my computer, the session is starting. So I switched over to my iPad, and the internet connection was slow, and I don't know, it was messing up my iPad. So I ended up starting the thing on my phone, doing my presentation as on my phone, and then my iPad connected, and I was able to just look at the camera on the iPad while talking on my phone. And then eventually my computer came back. And so having more than one device ready to go is important.
Mhm. Yeah, and you just stuff it's like risk management in supply chain. Stuff happens that you're never going to be able to control, so just be as prepared as possible.
Yes.
All right, so final let's go through your tips, and then I'll close out with my during and post tips.
All right, so my during is, think of your presentation as takeoff, flight, and landing. So your takeoff is your introduction, and you want to come out, and this does not mean get all like rah rah rah. It's just make sure you hit the ground running, and you really want to accelerate off the runway and get up into flight. Do your presentation, whatever. I usually structure it around three stories, and then a nice landing conclusion, summarize what you wanted them to take away. That's a really helpful structure, because what a lot of and a lot of my warm up is to get myself ready. So when I walk up on that stage, or when I log in virtually, bang, I'm ready to go. Separate or related to that, rather, do not walk onto stage and say, "Hi, my name's Eloise. I'm a consultant with Carney. Do not introduce yourself. If somebody wants, if you need to be introduced, have the host do it, the MC do it, somebody else do it, or don't do it at all, because people will figure out who you are.
You just
And so,
anytime I'm in an audience, I go on LinkedIn and Google the person and I find their
yeah,
profile.
exactly. And that's one of the, if you look at my early presentations, I would do this big wind up. And again, you're, I wouldn't say it's disrespect, but I would say you're not valuing the audience when you do that, and you're killing the energy in the room. Walk out on stage and bam, hit that story, or whatever that first point is, and go. Um, Read the audience, because it's live. It's harder when it's virtual, so it's a little harder to do this, but especially if you're in person, where you can read the energy of the audience, because you don't want to get up there and lecture and blah, blah, and also correspondingly decide where and when you're going to move and how you're going to use your hands. It feels good to do this, and you'll see me on this podcast. using my arms and gesticulating like crazy. But when you actually watch it as an audience member, it's like, what is that person doing up there? And it's so uncomfortable to stand there like this, but it looks so much more natural when you're reading as the audience. We talked about logistics. And the last thing on the during is just be authentic. Don't get up there and pretend to be a comedian or I don't know, whatever else. You're up there to tell your story about whatever it is you're doing, and say that it's going to be interesting. Know that it'll be interesting. The audience will love it, and then move on. This is, don't go over your time. Don't try to hit the point 400 times. Put the idea out there and let the audience capture it. Give the audience more credit. Then I have three things for after. Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So for mine, during, I am not good at pronouncing last names. So my trick is I do not say last names when I'm speaking or introducing people. So if you ever hear me, I'll say first names only. That's just a trick I've adopted that's worked really, really well. Saves me a lot of pain and agony trying to practice and stumble over last names. If it's in person, do not stand behind a podium. So move the podium to the side, ask the organizers to get it off the stage, give yourself the ability to move around and walk around to engage the audience versus being crunched behind a podium and being stuck. I think it is really hard to focus and it's hard for the audience to relate to you when you're in a very unhuman position behind something that's blocking you and the audience.
But don't pace, because much like the arm movements, if you're walking back and forth, the audience is getting tired following you. So pick a spot, go stand in that spot, tell some portion of the story or whatever you're conveying. Then, like at transitions, walk to another spot and interact with the audience.
Yep. And then if it's something that you're doing virtually, have your notes, if you are looking at notes, in a place where it doesn't look like you're going like this to read them. So if I was presenting right now, I would have a monitor behind me with my notes at eye level that were helping trigger, but I can't tell you how many people I've seen and they're like this, look completely looking at a different screen or monitor, and it's so obvious that they have their notes and it just is hard to follow and it's confusing.
Or if I may, doing this, like as a virtual audience member, the crunching of papers is so cringy, to use your word. It's like, please, please, please. You can use paper notes, but don't put them in a binder where you're like, just lay them out and so you can glance down, or just I just yeah.
Interesting. I haven't seen that much. I have seen people putting their notes on their phones. So someone will come on
Oh.
stage and have their phone and they'll be going through it, but I haven't seen the paper as much.
Oh, yeah. Well, maybe I run with older
All right, so post. After you do
post.
a speech, what do you do?
All right, so I always make sure I get a video of the session, and I do watch it, as painful, and I think I've talked about this before, as painful as it is. Also, you can use that video for marketing, and so it's really important and to do your sizzle reel, which is a compilation of your best moments. So get a copy of the video, watch it. Right immediately right after, not like literally immediately, but within the couple hours, sit down and write down what went well, and even better if, and or journal about it. And it seems like there's no way you'll forget this moment, and I guarantee you within 3 days you'll have completely forgotten everything if you don't journal it. So write that down, and then track. Track, so I have a tracking sheet. I don't know if I talked about this, but I track what the title of the session was, who sponsored it, where it was, what the location was, number of attendees, virtual. Was it in Amsterdam? Was it at virtual? Was it New York? I have about 20 different dimensions that I track. And when you start tracking that, because you asked what was the number of people at that first ISM conference I spoke at. I actually didn't track that. I would guess at 50 to 75, or go back and ask the presenters. It's a little easier when it's virtual because you can see that. But make sure you track what you did, the sort of metadata on what you did. That's my three.
So 2 for me. A lot of smaller venues or smaller organizations are not going to record your session. I would recommend going on Amazon and buying a tripod. You can get them for $20 or $30. Set up your cell phone and record it yourself. Do not rely
Yes.
on the conference organizers to do that. I think you'd be surprised. It's really expensive for somebody to have a professional audio crew coming in and doing that. And so, depending on the venue and the organization and what their budget is, they're likely not going to do that. So, be prepared yourself. There's a few times where I'm like, I should have asked. They didn't have it. I didn't have it together. So now I know that it's on my list of things to do.
Yeah, and I will ask that up front, and I'll give a shout out again to Amanda, and then also to Stephanie Lapierre, who so kindly recorded a really important keynote that I gave, and I didn't think about it. This was just bad form on my part. This was one of the times where I learned that I actually brought the presentation, so I had to go figure out and find the people to give the presentation to. And then I went to the room and it's like, wait, I need somebody to record this because it's not going to be recorded. And so they were really kind to do it, but it's just, yeah, it would have been so much better to have a just stick with tripod, put your iPhone on and let it go. Cause then you have much better.
Second thing is wear appropriate shoes. So if you're going to wear 3 or 4-inch stilettos, make sure you can walk in them and can be comfortable in them. I have seen people trip or wear shoes that they should not have been wearing in a presentation. And then it becomes very distracting for the audience and it becomes distracting for the speaker. And my third one is make sure that you make sure that you do some sort of recap on your performance. So rate yourself, have some sort of process. I did this well, I didn't do this well. Because if you just keep doing the same thing over and over, you're not going to improve. And one of the best ways for me is I'll sometimes plant people in my sessions to give me feedback. So I'll have somebody tune into my webinar or come into a session and I'll actually say, I want you to be super critical and I want you to make a list of all the things that I could have done better. And if there's any, standout things that I did well, but having another person there specifically focused on it is a good way to get feedback.
If I just want to go back to your shoes one thing I will practice is most often these things are on stages, and I will walk the steps up to the stage many times to practice. I will practice walking up because this is just my own idiosyncrasy of like, I don't want to trip going up on stage because that's got to be the most embarrassing thing. So, and oftentimes stages won't be level. So if you are wearing heels, which I do a lot, be careful and know where the uneven parts are. And that's why walking that stage is so important.
Yep. All right. I think that's it for today. We almost went a full hour. This was a long session, super important topic. And feel free to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn if this is something you want to talk more about or have, specific use cases or want advice. We will see you next Wednesday. If you're not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, encourage you to hit the subscribe button.